Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Byzantine Empire to give you some context for the first book we're reading as a class, Anna of Byzantium. Now this book is a historical fiction book, which means that the author, Tracy Barrett, did a lot of research into the time period and some real people in history, such as our main character, Anna Komnene. Based on her research, she created a story that she felt was representative of the life that Anna led, but it's not nonfiction because she created some characters, some situations. She changed the timeline somewhat to make it flow better for a novel. And she had to create things like conversations since we don't have a direct record of dialogue that would have occurred at the time. So a little bit of background on the Byzantine Empire. This empire can be traced back to 330 AD when the Roman Emperor Constantine I dedicated a new Rome on the site of the ancient Greek colony of Byzantium. The western half of the Roman Empire crumbled and fell in 476, but the eastern half survived for 1,000 more years. And that had somewhat to do with their location. The original Roman Empire covered what's seen here, as well as Spain and Portugal and France, a lot of those areas. Constantinople had something of an advantage. You can see perhaps it kind of in the middle over here. Because it is surrounded by so much water, it was in some ways easier to defend and created a good hub for them. In the Byzantine Empire, there was a rich tradition of art, literature, and learning, and serving as a military buffer between the states of Europe and the threat of invasion from Asia. The Byzantine Empire finally fell in 1453 after an Ottoman army stormed Constantinople during the reign of Constantine XI. So in your history class this year, you're going to read about various ancient empires and many of their religious and cultural traditions, and some parallels that you might notice between the various cultures you look at and the Byzantine are these. Women were confined to their homes. They were expected to stay home rather than go out and work. They wore veils in front of men, similar to Islam. They had a united language of Greek, which was at the time considered to be the language of scholars. Anna, as a princess, was expected to learn things that were befitting a princess at the time, such as etiquette and diplomacy and studies of the Bible, since she lived in a Christian country. She was also interested in classic literature and mythology and many things that were recorded in Greek, and so she did some teaching of herself to be able to read and write and understand Greek so that she could study these things that she was so interested in. Later on, she had a tutor who assisted her with those studies. In Byzantium, the emperor was considered ordained of God. Bureaucrats were recruited from all classes, and understandably, the peasant class was important to keeping everyone fed. They were the manual labor in the fields. In terms of art, mosaics, as seen here and on the cover, were very popular in Byzantium at this time in history. So they used tiny tiles to create a larger work of art. Another trend that you'll see in their art was the use of circles around the heads of religious leaders or emperors or other people of power, showing that they were sacred or ordained of God. Very important. Constantine had established Christianity as Rome's official religion at the time that Anna was alive. The citizens of Constantinople and the rest of the Eastern Roman Empire identified strongly both as Romans and as Christians, though many of them spoke Greek and not Latin. The Crusades were a series of religious and political wars fought between 1096 and 1291 for control of the Holy Lands. Pope Urban II initiated the First Crusade in order to aid the Christian Byzantine Empire, which was under attack by Muslim Seljuk Turks. As armies from France, Germany, and Italy poured into Byzantium, Alexius, who was Anna's father and emperor, tried to force their leaders to swear an oath of loyalty to him in order to guarantee that land regained from the Turks would be restored to his empire. So when it talks about her father going off to war and battling and their concern about the Turks, this is what they're talking about. The Crusades are, it was a long series of wars. So to kind of sum up, I want you to think about how the setting in which this story takes place affected the characters, the people in the story, what they did, and how they were treated, and really what happens in the story. We're thinking about the influence of the setting. So for one thing, there's a lot of mention of war, right? Anna's father fought in the First Crusade. If you're interested in the Crusades, I'll link to some more information. Art is mentioned throughout the book, which was largely religious and often included saints, angels, and other similar imagery. Mosaics as a medium were very popular at this time, hence the cover. Culturally, there were a few things that you'll notice in the book. Men and women were often separated in public, including at meal times. Women were expected to veil their faces in public. Anna and Constantine were betrothed. Betrothed means intended to be married as arranged by the emperor in this case. But they don't date. They're just expected to get married, right? So that system was a little different from today, as you can see. In terms of their beliefs, they had traditional Greek myths that were taught to Anna by Simon, her tutor. These are from the polytheistic means many gods, religion that many people in that part of the world grew up with. And also, Byzantium was officially a Christian empire at the time she lived, and so her mother was a devout Christian, named for the patroness Irene of peace, and she teaches Anna about this monotheistic, one-God Christian religion. So Anna is influenced by all of these things as she's growing up.